But my name's Cameron Belt. I am an economist, card-carrying one, so I'm super data nerd, basically. But in reality, what I am is a little bit different. So, background, I've lived in Vegas my whole life. My family's been here since the 30s. So, living, breathing, fourth generation, actually fifth generation to live here. We've been around for a long time. I worked in tech. I was at Uber and Lyft before. I was with RCG Economics. At RCG, I am a senior economist and research director. While I was at Lyft, I was basically in charge of, I was like the regional CFO for the Southwest into the central locations. My job was growth and profitability and actually building a business that can continue along. So with that, we'll go ahead and start. What is economics? I always start with this. It's what we do as economists. I hope that clears up anything that you have any questions or any thoughts. It should be super, super simple. In reality, what economics is about us. It's about people. It's about trade. It's what I talk about. Yes, there's data involved in it. And yes, that data is extremely important. And yes, that data helps make decisions. But that data is all representative of one truth. How well are we all cooperating with one another? That's the bottom line. The more we cooperate with one another, the more GDP goes up. The more we cooperate with one another, the better labor markets tend to look. What it comes down to is it's about humans. And we use numbers to kind of display what's going on with these human interactions and connections. Oh, I know, look at that. That's interesting. We'll just use this instead of the clicker. So what we're going to talk about, high level, we're going to talk about the US economy. I'll try to sum it up in 3 sentences. Southern Nevada, labor, visitors, and land. Some quick thoughts on what I've got for AI, and then also final thoughts, what I call, there's macro conditions, but there's only micro actions. So going through the US economy, I like to always start with just a high level of what everybody expects me to talk about. What's GDP and what's it looking like? Right now, GDP growth is pretty volatile. In Q4, we were up 4.2%. Q1 expectations are much less. 4.2% was quite a bit, but Q1's looking at 2.3. What does that mean? Not ideal, honestly. Any growth right around 2% or so is kind of just like steady state for the most part. If you factor in other types of things, it's not growing very much is what it comes down to. So it's not bad, it's not negative. We're not in a recession, but it's also not great. Now, the unemployment is starting to tick up. That's that black line right there. We're starting to see unemployment start to go upwards at the nation, but the big one is on the labor side, we're now starting to see a reverse in trend where there's more jobs available, there's more people looking for jobs than there are job postings available. Underlying this is a little bit of a measurement issue that even right now, a lot of the jobs that are available may actually not be real. So one good thing that I like to talk about when it comes to all the macroeconomic data that I go over is I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I'd be living in the summit and I'd be playing golf right now, not talking to everybody here, right? So I to some level, we're all operating with snapshots of what the world really is and what it's looking like, right? So what I can say is we're starting to see a trend upwards from where we were at a really good spot around 2022 or towards the end. Is it bad? Not necessarily. It's coming back up within trend for long term, right? But we are starting to see some more friction in the labor market without question. Now, one question that we've been looking at is what does it look like by sector? What has this job growth been looking like? This is something extraordinarily important to understand because not every job is the same, right? Some jobs are more productive than others, and some actually are subsidized. In reality, over the last 12 months, all of the job growth that we've seen has come from one of the most heavily subsidized sectors, private education and health services. If you look there, every other sector for the most part has been negative. So the job growth that we've been seeing hasn't necessarily been productive job growth. It's jobs, but they're jobs that exist at the result of pulling from the private sector. You can't have jobs that pull from the private sector growing faster than the private sector for very long. That's a structural issue, right? If you look across it, transportation and warehousing is down. Manufacturing is down over 12 months, which is wild because if you look at output of manufacturing in the US, it's actually up. But that's all due to AI, right, for the most part. With AI, they're able to cut some jobs back, they're able to start moving some things forward, and they're also able to start reaping in some profits, which is great, it's good. But I'll tell you right now, I was giving a talk at Bend, Oregon to Schnitzer Properties, which is a pretty large industrial real estate broker, and they said that in Portland, they're actually, or I think it's Seattle, they're seeing warehouses go up that are completely dark. They're vertical warehouses where each floor is quite literally just robots and there's no lights, which means there's no workers. So the more and more this happens, it is productive without question. And I'll never say that we shouldn't be diving into this, but we should be aware of what it's actually doing to the labor market. Because again, the positives that are coming from this are true, but it's causing some structural friction in the process that you can't really avoid. But the majority of this is to say, our job growth isn't coming from sustainable areas over the last 12 months, without question. So along with this, we're starting to see debt burden pick back up. That black line is the household's percentage of their disposable income going to debt. And the red line is the same thing, but for savings. So debt's back up to where it was before, but savings is lagging behind pretty hard. Savings also includes the ability for individuals to invest. Investment is extraordinarily important at the household level because that opens up the door for future growth. Savings fuels growth. We have to hold back now in order to be able to put towards things that can pay off later. With less savings, there's less available in the market, which means there's less for entrepreneurs to do. There's less available for them to pull out, which causes things to be kind of an issue. Normally, when interest rates are as high as they are in a normal market, that induces people to save because I get a guaranteed return, right? So normally when interest rates rise, you tend to see savings rise with it. That's not happening right now. That's a bit of a problem. And that's because we're starting to be squeezed a lot. We're starting to see delinquencies on all debt, for the most part, increase. The only issue is that it's not on housing. So if I can get this to work, let's see here. Oh, there we go. Cool. So up here we've got credit cards and student debt, but down here in this corner, that's mortgages and home HELOCs. We don't have a real issue right now on the housing side. There's not going to be a housing crash or anything like that anytime soon because everybody's pretty much cash rich in their house. But what's happening is savings are down and debt is up. And so that's beginning to really squeeze consumers. It's beginning to squeeze their ability to buy. And with that, oh man, there we go. We'll just use this from now on. There it goes. With that, we're also seeing rising prices. So usually when we talk about inflation, people look at it on a year-over-year basis. Whenever you see it on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC, I hate that view because it actually kind of blurs the real point here. Inflation is cumulative. Since this rampant inflation started in 2021, gas is up 23%. It was up a lot more, and it's probably going to go back up again right now, right? Food is up 27%. All items are up 24%. Core prices are up 23%. But that bottom line you'll see there, that purple, is the average weekly wages, which has lagged behind entirely this entire time. Now they're up to 22%, which is the smallest gap that I've seen so far, but I have a feeling that this is going to accelerate again pretty soon. So when people say inflation's down, don't worry about it, but you're feeling like you don't have as much money as you did a few years back, it's not that you're against the macroeconomic trends. They're not crazy. It's just they're presenting them in a way that doesn't make any sense. Because I don't know about you guys, but I tend to remember what was in my pocket 4 years ago. So here's my 3 sentences. The U.S. economy, debt is up, savings are down, and wages aren't up enough yet. It doesn't mean disaster at all, but it doesn't spell healthy either. These are things that are important to have in order for growth to occur going forward, without question. There's no way that you can, the only way for this to change in reverse course is, right now, a few different structural corrections throughout the economy, or AI to finally usher in productivity gains that are just going to massively outweigh this. Which I think there's a lot of people banking on that, but we'll see. I mean, it's definitely adding, it's benefiting quite a bit. Yeah, question?
Well, I have a question concerning the AI. As AI improves and creates dark warehouses.
Sure.
Now you have 150 people less contributing to the GDP in the form of taxes. Now, the corporate tax is set at X value. Does that match the value that the United States is going to take in taxes, or is it just going to continue to increase our debt because we don't have as many people paying taxes? So
I will say this: AI is always going to change the labor markets, right? There's going to be structural changes that come through. This has been around since the dawn of time. Any technology is going to come through and it's going to displace, right? My favorite example to tell people is back in New York, back in the day when before alarm clocks, people used to walk around and knock on people's windows to wake them up, right? Then that job went away, right? It's been this kind of process for always. So right now the difference is the speed at which it's happening. Right? We are seeing displacement happen quite a bit, quite fast. But I'll get to that kind of a little bit later. I will say on the fiscal side, just because we only have like a half hour, I pulled a lot of the fiscal stuff out because it's also kind of doom and gloomy, I'm not going to lie. But I will say the number one problem facing our country without question is the fact that we're trillions of dollars in debt and we have no way coming back as at this point. And we're at a point in debt that is higher as a percentage of GDP than we were coming out of World War II. And we weren't at war with the rest of the world yet.
So I have a question. You haven't touched on demographics and the changes.
Yeah.
Where we're seeing, the largest sort of retirees are kind of the biggest part of our economy right now. And as they get older, they stop investing in things that lead to money that can be leveraged.
Yep.
They put in very safe investments so that the market dries up in terms of available cash for investment. So it's a couple of different things hitting them. And we're looking at millennials sort of starting to get older and they're in their maximum consumption, but they're, while they're one of the larger groups demographically, they're not going to be around for another 10 years or so. And then the next group after them, very much smaller, and they're not going to be nearly the level of consumption. So if we have a consumer consumption-driven economy, and you've got old people who are buying stuff and playing it safe, and you've got millennials who are a relatively large demographic are also going to be consuming less in the next little while. And you've got this really small demographic coming in on the heels of that. How does that work with an economy that's moving more toward, a service economy and less toward manufacturing and all the rest of it? If you haven't mentioned any of the demographic stuff that's going to hit, is that because you're looking at a relatively short time frame? Or
it's because I'm looking at it for a presentation for 30 minutes. To reality. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of filter down as much as I can. As an economist, I like to tell people that I get paid to throw data out. I can look at everything, right? And I could, and I have. And normally this talk, I think this is normally like an hour long. So I've condensed. I do get into that and else otherwise, but it's not an omission because I don't think it's important. It's just an omission because of time constraints. But no, you're totally fine. No worries about it at all. But I'll say that like the reason, you're absolutely right. Now, I will say one thing, consumption is important, but consumption exists because of production. And so we have to produce in order for us to be able to consume. I mean, think about it, like I can't consume something unless I first produce it. So it's called Say's law. It's production creates consumption is what it comes down to, and it has to. And so what we have to be looking at, and again, when I get into the point of AI causing more production, it's possible that right now we are seeing a trend downwards because, again, millennials on paper have the cash. A lot of it's tied up to houses if they have them. The older generations are sitting on stockpiles right now. They're pretty decently wealthy, well, relatively and comparatively. And so we're starting to see them continue to consume, but they're changing up their consumption towards those subsidized roles that I was talking about before. Healthcare, right? And so it's kind of getting pushed out of the productive economy and towards this one that's being held up by subsidization in different ways.
Going back to the previous question, though, that law is based on elastic base of consumers. If you don't have the consumers, right, then you can produce all you want. There's no market for it.
And that's actually what I get to towards the end as well. Yeah. Because, again, you have to produce things of value, right? You have to produce things that the market actually cares about, which is the big takeaway for startup founders in all of this. Because all of these things that I'm going to talk about right now at the macro level, none of us can do jack about. I can't do anything about the national savings rate. I can't do anything about CPI. I mean, I can write a letter to a congressman or go show up and testify because I've done those things before. But ultimately, it's all out of my hands. But it's important to be aware of the context of where things are for the highest level things in order for us to make the decisions on our local side, which is how I get into talking about Southern Nevada, because there is a little bit more that we can do closer to home. I will say I think most people's focus is on the national to the detriment of understanding what you can do actually locally or be aware of locally. Because I actually know my congressmen and my senators and my state people. I've never met the president before, right? I've never met most of the people that vote on federal issues. The more you have access to people here, the more we can be aware of these things. And I actually know businessmen who are here, right? I know I've got contacts with a lot of these individuals. So the more we're talking with these decision makers and being aware of what they are, the better that we can end up being. And that's not a political talk, it's just that the fact that the economy is intertwined with this. So for Las Vegas, the story is really good in general for the last few years. Since, since right before 2020, we're up almost 10% in terms of jobs since 2019, which is insane. That is a lot of growth in a very short time frame. We were absolutely the number one state for multiple years. Once COVID kind of stopped, we were growing like gangbusters. It's slowed. We finally starting to see negative job growth year over year, but it's not horrible. It's just it's less than 1%. But there's some structural issues going on. We've also lost a lot of hotel rooms in the process, right? The Mirage closing down, the Tropicana closing. When those things close, other jobs come through, but it also does change up who's here. But here's the kicker. We were first for a long time. Now we're kind of down towards the bottom. That little red dot right there is Nevada compared to all the other states in terms of job growth year over year for at least November. Some of this data is delayed because of the federal shutdown, just so everybody's aware. That's not because I'm lazy, it's because the federal government can't get their stuff together. But the kicker here is that 76% of the US saw less than 1% job growth year over year in November. I don't know how GDP will grow faster than 2% if we are seeing less than 1% job growth, right? So when I'm talking about looking at on a macro level, things are fine right now, but if these trends continue, it's not great. We're going to see growth slow. My worst case prediction right now for the US economy is stagflation, without question, which is basically a period where we're not going to see much economic growth, and we're going to see rampant, persistent inflation for a decent period of time. The last time we had that was in the 70s. I wasn't born. I heard it sucked. But it's what it comes down to is it's not great, right? It's honestly not the best kind of situation for us to find ourselves in. Now, with Vegas, we have seen some cool changes over the last 20 years. From 2005 to 2025, we have diversified. We absolutely have. Not as much as some people want us to necessarily, but if you look at that really big green bucket, the percentage of people that were in leisure and hospitality, which is the one that everybody's trying to get us away from, has shrunk from 30% down to 26% of the workforce. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still the largest by far. It's still the big gorilla in the room, but we've seen gains in those underlined sectors. Education and health services, which again is subsidized, but it's still positive. Professional and business services, which is kind of seen as the hallmark of a productive, diversified economy. And also trade, transportation, and utilities. We're becoming more and more of a warehousing, manufacturing hub than we were before, but we're delayed quite a bit for a lot of different reasons that I'll get into later. The one kicker is information. You'll see I highlighted it there. It's that tiny little guy with 1.3. That's tech, for the most part. Most tech jobs are thrown into information. There's a lot of opportunity here for more growth, but it's going to take some time for that to happen, and there's a lot of catalysts that have to happen too, right? There's a lot of things that have to go into it that takes a little bit of a while, but I think it's important for us as founders of tech companies, prospective founders of tech companies, or anybody in the tech industry to be aware of at least where we are. Now, one thing that I always like to talk about, because again, I'm an economist, is that wages are up 53% since 2014, but if you adjust it for inflation, it's only up about 4%. Not great. Lags behind the US, I think, by like 1 percentage point. The US is about 5%. But when we talk about things getting more expensive, when we talk about a lot of this stuff, it's funny is I was actually the first person to really start bringing up inflation-adjusted numbers at a state level call that we have. A bunch of economists get on. We're the only private firm involved. It's all labor and everybody else from the governor's office. And we were talking about actually Gaming Win 2 years ago and how Gaming Win was just making records, right? Every single month we broke a record-breaking month on gaming, record-breaking month. And I asked everybody, did you guys adjust this for inflation at all? And they said, oh no. I go, well, I did, and we're actually down year over year, and we're actually down 30% from our peak in 2007. So, and with that, it's like, it's on an accounting basis, nominal dollars are important. On an economic basis, it's important for me to be aware of the amount of activity that's actually coming through. But what's really fun is I was on a call with Jefferies Group, which is a pretty large hedge fund. They brought me on to talk about the state of Las Vegas, and I brought this point up. And the manager of the fund said, that's a really cool point, but what it tells me that you guys are down 30% from 2007, you guys haven't hit the top, so I'm gonna throw more money into you. And so the same data point can be looked differently depending on what frame of reference you're looking at, right? The investor versus the economist versus the accountant. But it's important for us to at least be aware of where these things are while we're just kind of championing, oh, nothing but record-breaking growth. It's like, yeah, it's more dollars, but there's 30% more dollars out there, so we're going to break records. Question first in the...
How localized can inflation be? Like, some places housing costs rise fast.
Yeah, that's actually another map or graphic that I put in here every now and then when I dive more into housing. You can see differences in inflation materialize differently across regions. The BEA, or the BLS, excuse me, chunks us over into the West Coast and then South and things along those lines. And there's a map that actually showed that it hit us pretty hard relatively compared to everywhere else, mostly because of housing. But I will say, ultimately, underneath it all, inflation is not rising prices. Inflation is prices that rise as a result of increasing the money supply. Prices can rise for any number of factors that are unrelated to inflation, right? Like a meteor could come down and destroy the only uranium plant in the world, and the prices for uranium would skyrocket. That has nothing to do with inflation. That's just the market moving, right? Inflation prices can rise for a root found in Africa because you find out that it all of a sudden cures cancer, right? Prices rise for lots of different reasons: supply, demand, etc. Inflation is always monetarily related, and so we do see it come through at different times, though. It doesn't just go out to everybody all at the same time. What happens is the first receivers get it first, and they get tomorrow's money with today's prices. They benefit the most. And then it makes its way through and eventually gets there. And so groups like, and the reason why inflation was so much on the West Coast, a lot of investors coming in and buying housing, things like that, they were just making business decisions because they could get a house on less than 1% of an interest rate. It's going to appreciate at 2 to 3%. It just makes sense for them to dump that cash in there when all of a sudden in the middle of 2020, they're given a direct line to the federal treasury. I didn't have that line, but other companies did, right? I don't hold that against them because it's just a business decision, but it's how it played out. And then you had a question also.
Extremely quick point of clarification. So
Yeah.
that Jeffries guy, that was this is a value stock, it's 30% under. Let me buy it while it's low.
Kind of value play. The other side of it is just structurally understanding that Vegas could seem more. Right. At one point when Vegas was hot, it was real hot, right? And so being aware of that it has the structural capacity to do so. And in reality, we are bigger than we were in 2007 too, just in terms of room count and things like that. And so it was it's a value play without question. There were some underlying, financials for them. It's now been long enough that I can actually probably talk about it because I think they made it public. Their stocks that they were picking were Red Rock, which played out perfect, MGM, which played out decent, and then also I think it was Wynn versus anything else. They stayed away from Caesars. One sec, let me get through this just a little bit. So we're on the visitors and gaming point. I'll just make one high level point. Vegas isn't dead, it's down, without question. You can't not say that it's down right now. We are down 9.9% in terms of visitors year over year from our peak right before COVID. It's been a downward trend. The trouble is we're also down about 10% on convention attendance. Convention attendance is really important because they bring their purchasing cards. I don't know if you guys have ever taken your corporate card and gone somewhere, but you're a little bit more spendy with that than you are with your own cash, right? And so they do different things. They're looking at different stuff. We've got visitors here, but we've also changed who they are to some extent. And that's going through into what I said. Gaming win, it's slowed down on a nominal basis. It's only up by about a percentage point year over year, but on a real basis, we're down as of the most recent month. Taxable retail sales also overwhelmingly has been down on a real basis for the last few months. It's now starting to tick up a little bit. We'll see. But those two things are important because they directly affect tax revenue here in Nevada. And overwhelmingly, I think 70% of discretionary budget funding for the state of Nevada comes from taxable retail sales. So when that gets stressed, that adds stress to the system. It adds stress to grant programs that might be available for startups, things along those lines. But it's important for us to be aware of it. Our firm was actually brought in to testify in front of the Legislative Council Bureau's Economic Forum prior to the last legislative session. And they asked us, what do you guys think is going to happen with some of the tax revenue? And we told them taxable retail sales are going to go down. A few of these other things are probably going to be flat. They didn't listen to us. They started the legislative process. They had an assumption that it was going to go up in the next 2 years by 15%. Halfway through the process, they end up getting some updated numbers that shows that we were down by like 6%, and it caused a huge crap storm, we'll say, in the middle of the session because they had rosy pictured ideals of what was going to happen. I will say, my family's been here for a long time. I grew up here. I love this city. I'm not a cheerleader, right? I'm not going to sit here and just spoon feed. We're the best. We're everything else. We're great. We absolutely are great. It's my favorite city in the world. But I'm not. One of my points I make is I'm optimistic, but I'm not delusional. There's things that we need to be aware of, and there's things that we need to try to do as much as we can to about them while we have the chance. This is one of those things. By about 2035 or so, we're looking to see growth of population in Las Vegas grow by 19% and employment by 17%. I just have one glaring question. Where the hell are they going to go? Because there's no land. On the left, you have vacant developable land as of 1980 in Las Vegas, and on the right, you have what that looked like in 2024. There's not a lot. And now you might be asking, but Cameron, up there at the top, that goes up to Utah. There's like Moapa and things like that. And then down here at the bottom, that goes down to California. There's a bunch of land down there, to which I'll say you're absolutely right. But we are not allowed to touch it. Hands off. It's going to take an act of Congress for us to touch any specific parcel of land that's outside of this boundary that's surrounding the city. This boundary was put into effect in the late 1990s. It's the worst acronym you'll ever hear out of the government, the SNPLMA, the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act. It's a mouthful. It was good because at the time what it did was it recognized that there was a lot of barriers. The federal government owns roughly 85% of all of Nevada, about 90% of Clark County specifically. So Harry Reid and Richard Bryan got together. They wrote up a 2-page bill, which is impressive. I've never seen a federal bill be 2 pages before. The power that those guys had was impressive. But 2-page bill that basically said, hey, all the land that exists in this border around Las Vegas, we're going to pre-authorize the sale of everything that's owned by the BLM. So we'll rubber stamp the sale, and then it will go through a process that will evaluate at the time and go through yada yada, which is great because otherwise we would have needed an act of Congress for every single piece of land that exists. Wherever your house is, wherever everything is, it would have had to go through Congress. Senators Bryan and Reid did something that had never been done before in the US and hasn't happened since. The problem is, we're now at the borders of this land. By 2030, we'll be out if development patterns continue. It's not ideal. So we really need Congress to figure this crap out. Catherine Cortez Masto has tried. Mark Amodei has tried. A lot of people, Susie Lee has tried. It's just getting people to be aware of this in Congress and actually throw support behind it is really hard. There's an op-ed that I wrote not too long ago called Southern Nevada's Land Problem Isn't Going Away. Look it up. I go into it a little bit detail. And then I have a second one that came out this week called Southern Nevada's Other Land Problem, and that talks all about zoning laws and how not great those are too. But you had a question.
To shift to the political environment, given that this is oftentimes a purple state, and we voted with the winner of the last election, how much do you think this could be pressed as a political issue to try to, for a candidate, to try to sway the state and say, if you want Nevada, you're going to need to open that up or something like that? Is that an angle that can help us economically?
Yeah, I know that Lombardo's tried. He at least, I don't, he's made it publicly aware that he's pushing on this. Now, to the extent and how hard and everything else, that can be quabbled on, right? But it definitely, he's made it a priority. He's gone out and said, we need to get this land made available. There's a lot of different interest groups throughout the state that are making this point, right? Our firm specifically, the NAIOP, which is industrial real estate, the realtors as well. Everybody's got a piece in this right now. LVGEA, the city, Henderson, everything. The problem is, structurally, what's the answer? Because you talk to any of the US senators, they'll say, okay, what land do you want? My response is, I want all of it. Get out of my state. Right? They own 90%, the 85% of our state. The next closest state in terms of federal land ownership is Utah at 60-something%. Nobody has this problem to the effect that we do. And it's very, very niche, but it's very, very important to the growth of our community. And so we do need to be aware of it. And it does create a structural barrier because let's say that, I was talking with somebody earlier, we want a gigafactory like Tesla to come in down here, right? There's not a single plot of land that'll do that, that's available. It's hard. It's just impossible to do that. There are some large scale things that can come through, but they're going to find other markets that don't have issues like this right now to deal with. Because I'll say this, there's a lot of vacant land, but a lot of this isn't even developable. It might be on the side of a hill. Like earlier last year when Trump came through and said, okay, we're going to try to get rid of all these federal lands, I looked to see what they actually put out a map. Half of it was just mountains. I'm like, I can't build a house on this. Right? So the number of acres don't matter. It's acres that can actually be used that matters. And getting that answer is really, really, really hard, and nobody wants to pay for the study to figure it out. So I think that what has to happen is, if I were to throw the craziest thing out there when it comes to zoning, I would just eliminate single-family residential only entirely. 70% of the vacant land that exists in unincorporated Clark County, which is just Clark County, not the city of Henderson or Las Vegas or North Las Vegas, that is slated for single-family housing. Our community has a shortage of around 100,000 or so units for affordable housing right now. We're not going to do it with 70% of all the land going to single-family. Like it's not going to happen. So we need to open up the door for more types and more product types and variability to come through. Things like removing single-family zoning, removing setbacks, removing certain minimum parking requirements, things along those lines. This is all stuff that has to happen locally, I think, but just people have to kind of suck it up and get ready to go. Because again, in that other article I put out, Southern Nevada's other land problem, Vegas grew in a very weird way in that you can see kind of here in the 80s, so much of this land is vacant over here. It's all red, right? And there's little pockets. It's like, why is that? Well, because some people happened to get that before the federal government released it. They built on it, which is great. But then it was all vacant in between. I don't know if you've ever driven down Buffalo before, but the second you get to Tropicana, you run into the side of Spanish Trails. It's like it's a thoroughfare that runs on the side of a massive housing development. It's because all this existed before anything else in between. So it grew in a very haphazard manner, but it also grew underneath zoning laws, which most major metros never had, at least until they got established. You look at the history of Vegas compared to like Chicago, New York, LA, older cities, we're relatively young, and zoning didn't exist until like the 50s on a mass scale. And so we kind of were built around this idea of planning rather than kind of organic. And there's a social researcher named Jane Jacobs who used to say that a city can't be a work of art. It's a living, breathing thing. It has to be able to change. But the more we have things that kind of structure what you're allowed to do with it, it's going to mess with it. So I said a lot more than 3 sentences because there are a lot of really good questions. But in 3 sentences for Vegas are, the market's cooling down. It's not dead. It's cool. Okay. The talent pool is tight, especially for tech. Right? Like I said, 1.3% of the population of employment right now is in that. And then, like I said, the cost of being here is going up. It is a little bit more expensive compared to national averages for median families to afford median homes. When we compare ourselves to the top 20 markets in the US, we're super cheap, which is great for people moving here from San Francisco or LA because they can buy a bigger house for less. But for those who are living here, we're seeing a little bit of more of an issue than other places. So we've got a few more minutes. I'm going to try and breeze through this real fast. This is one of my counterpoints to AI, all right? I am AI maximalist in many ways. I think there's going to be massive amounts of benefits that come from AI, but just because it makes you faster doesn't mean that it makes you right. So what AI does for startups, it shrinks the time and cost of building, right? It will help you when you have limited resources, spring things up really quick, helps you iterate, you can test ideas. It's really just a force multiplier, right? One thing that I'll call out though is this current generation is really good with going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. I worry about AI's ability to allow you to shift so much that you're going to let good ideas go to waste because you didn't give them enough time to germinate. The faster that you're able to prototype means you're able to prototype fast, but it also means that you can reduce your training set really quick too. So while you're using this, you have to make sure that you're not removing yourself from actually getting data that's beneficial and valuable to you. But just because you make something doesn't mean the market actually cares about it. If I were to sit here and go on Claude right now and say, give me 20 ideas for viral posts, it'll give me 20 ideas that will not go viral. So it didn't do jack, right? It gave me ideas, but it's not guaranteed to actually be what the market wants. At the end of the day, value is subjective, right? I care about certain things. I love to golf. I've spent a lot of money on golf in my life. And I'm sure there's people in here who would never spend a penny on what I've spent, right? consumers are the end result of all of what we're building for, right? Your companies are being built. We can make cool things for ourselves. And look, I have hobbies. As part of my golf, I actually take pictures on courses. I've gotten a chance to film Augusta. I've gotten chances to be in a lot of really cool courses. It's a hobby. And I'm happy to turn that into a hobby and keep that being a hobby. And you can use AI to be hobbies and to make cool things, make little tools. I made my younger brother, who just got out of college, and he was struggling with just like getting some tasks done. So I used Base 44 to whip up a task app for him. And it's just this little personal thing that just is a really cool little kind of high level, hey, you can get rid of this. I'm not going to put it on the market at all. It exists and it's serving a purpose, but it's there as a small project. And that's fine. But the more and more you're using AI, the more and more stuff you're putting out there, make sure that you're actually putting out things that the market needs. Because I'm not looking for activity, you're looking for progress, right? And that's where we kind of have to be aware of this, is where are these efforts going to? And this is my kind of real big thing that I talk about when it comes to the overall. I alluded to this point earlier. There's macro conditions. The macro environment exists. All these data points I talked about are real. They can't get rid of them, right now at least. So what we have to do is think about what can I do and where can I focus on in the meantime. What I'm going to tell you is the biggest thing that you can do as a startup founder is focus on revenue. Everything else, grants aren't going to tell you jack about if the market needs what you want. AI generated content's not going to tell you that this is going to work, right? Pitch competitions can be helpful and they're good and they're really, really important, but they're not going to tell you once you get into the market either. Ultimately, you need customers paying and using your thing. That's what the economy is at the end of the day. I can talk about all these things on the blackboard, but in the reality, what it comes down to is all of us are working to serve each other. We're working to be able to make each other's lives better. That's why we live together, is because I can do more when I work with more people. Because I can focus on what I do really well, you can focus what you do really well, and we trade the excess. It was all the way back to 250 years ago when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. Quite literally, it was 250 years ago to this month, which is kind of cool. And I'm actually reading it right now, and it's taken way too much of my time because it's a really long book. But in any case, so what can you control as a founder? All the stuff I talked about is not controllable, but think about this from this actionable kind of set of things. Build revenue, keep yourself lean, hire real carefully, especially within this market, right? Focus on the customer. You need products that are clear, not clever. People need to understand it and see it and use it, not just have it exist. If it solves a problem for you, that is awesome, but you are trying to build something for more than just yourself. So you have to be thinking about the value of the consumer on that side, and use AI as much as you can to move quickly, but also be aware of where it can kind of push you aside. So here's my 6 thoughts for 26. This is what this all comes down to. Be optimistic, but not delusional. I will say this, pessimism never changed the world. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't help being pessimistic in the slightest. So I just, from a pragmatic stance, choose to be optimistic. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to, I just think that some plain Gaussian view of the world where everything's going to work out perfect and everything's puppy dogs and rainbows. It's be aware that there's things that actually will challenge us and that can make things difficult. As a startup founder, and again, I can attest to this as being one as of right now. If you want to talk to me about my startup, I can absolutely, we have a 360-degree resistance training belt that's being used in the MLB, the NBA, the NFL, and the NCAA right now, and kind of going out. It started as a hands-free dog leash. I'll show you videos if you want to see it, but in any case, the role that you have in the startup journey is vision starts first, right? Product is next, or at least prototype, traction, then revenue. As you go up that path, more and more investors will be willing to talk to you. Finding somebody to talk to you about your pre-revenue company there's a small, narrow amount of investors that are out there that'll talk to you about something that's pre-revenue. The second you have a product, it opens up a bit. The second you have people using your product, it opens up a little bit more. The second you have people using it and giving you cash, that's when it becomes more of a business rather than an idea. And in this world with a lot of uncertainty right now, we have to be focused on this more than anything, I think. Constraints exist, bottom line. All the things I talked about so far are constraints. If you're looking to get grants, grant funding is constrained right now. The federal government pulled back on a lot of it last year, right? A lot of private organizations don't have as much ready to go. So you have to operate within those. You have to work where you are, not where you wish you were. Activity or value is what I talked about before. You can do lots of stuff, but do things that actually people want to pay you for, right? That doesn't, now I'm not saying don't test. You have to do that, but you have to keep in mind, it's not about you. It's about more of what this product is going to be doing for somebody else. Accepting uncertainty is probably the biggest thing that anybody can do within their life or business in general. We have a tendency to think that a lot more data means that we know more. That's not true. More data can help us, but it has to be the right data. And sometimes having more data just will confuse the crap out of you. And it's real. And the last thing is the most inefficient thing you can do is be ineffective. And what I mean by that is you waste the most money building something that nobody wants. Make sure you're building something, right? For me, as an economist, people usually think that I'm all about efficiency. I am, as long as you're doing something that's actually working. Be effective first, and then figure out how to be efficient. That doesn't mean blow all your cash or anything else, but it does mean focus on what you can do first. Don't push yourself into obscurity because you're trying to cut costs so much. Most companies die because they try to be too efficient at the expense of effectiveness. This is more of a point for companies that already exist versus startups, but it's what I saw when I was working at both Uber and Lyft firsthand. So this is a concluding thought that I have. This is my favorite quote in all of economics. The curious task of economics is to teach men how little they know about what they think they can design. This world is constantly changing. There's more information out there than can actually be quantifiable, and it's all really important. And we have to be aware that there's more to what we're doing than what we can see on blackboards, on data, on dashboards, or anything else. If you liked what I had to talk about, I've been writing a bunch as of late. I've got one mini book. I've got one full book that's coming out pretty soon, and I have another one that's on the way. My whole thing is economics is the most useful but least used discipline in the world. It applies to your life, it applies to your business, it applies to your decisions, and it applies to your community, but we don't use it enough. And that's mostly the fault of economics because they've made it really boring and really hard to get into. I'm trying to change that. So within the next little bit, Economics for Busy People should launch here. I'm releasing it chapter by chapter, but it's 52 chapters that walk you through what economics is, all the way to can markets be moral. Each chapter is roughly 800 words and can be read in 5 minutes at a 7th grade level. So I guarantee everybody here can definitely understand it. But in any case, we also do our firm locally. If you like local stuff, if you want to get some data reports, scan that guy, sign up for our newsletters that we have. We put out weekly periodicals that aggregate information at the local level and at the national level. We also put out work on our job front and everything else. So I think we're getting close to time. It's 1:08. I think it was supposed to be through 15. We got a few more minutes for questions. I'm happy to talk. I know I talked fast, but you guys had some really awesome insights. Now's the time you can tell me I'm full of crap.
We'll add number 7 to your list.
Yeah.
Right now, AI is in a state where it's affordable.
Yes.
Everybody that's providing AI is losing about 20 times the amount of money.
Yep.
So I'd say whatever you do in 2026, do it now with AI before your $20 a month clock subscription is going to be worn.
I couldn't agree more. And as a personal thing, what I do is I am backing up chats elsewhere as I go through and build things out. And I'm saving them offline so that way if all of a sudden something happens to this and I really want to pull from it, I've got my own repository of it and I don't have to go through the gatekeepers, right? So as long as I can use this as a thinking partner, I'm going to use it as a thinking partner until it gets to the point that I've got to throw that cash down, right? I think the CEO of NVIDIA recently said, like, hey, if the $500,000 engineer is only using $5,000 worth of tokens per year, I'm going to fire his ass. I want him to use like at least 250 to 500, right? It's going to be a lot easier for that to happen pretty soon. But that's a great point, and I think it's very, very perfect. Any other questions, comments? Does anybody want to throw tomatoes at me from their lunch? Awesome.
So thank you very much. About inflation, do the fuel prices, the gas prices, the crude oil prices, and a lot of trade disruptions also impact businesses where the businesses are careful right now. For the sunglass space, and they used to offer a bunch of discounts, and now they're saying because the shipments are stuck, not offering no discounts. Instead, we're looking to increase prices.
Yeah, we will see prices go up across lots of goods. We already have. There's another graph that I have in here from Harvard Pricing Lab that looks at the impact of tariffs specifically. It pulls out everything else. And you can see the trend in prices change dramatically right after Liberation Day last year on not only those goods that are imported and exposed to tariffs, but also all other goods within the U.S. that are not exposed. We're talking like roughly, I think it's between, and don't quote me on the numbers exactly, but it's like 3.5 to 5 percentage points increase away from the trend that we were prior to Liberation Day. So they basically said, what was the trend of these prices beforehand? Let's extend that out over time and compare to where we are right now to that gap. So I'll be around the rest of the day. Please feel free to come talk to me. Yeah, I'm not afraid to talk. So thank you all.